No, I was gonna say, how did you find me and this crazy thing that I'm doing?
Oh, I was thinking about that. Like, I have a some really dear friends, and like the people we like. Well, these were to my questions for you. Of I like you and Theo Vaughn basically, and I think it is because there's just authenticity is such a weird
Yeah,
word, but
yeah,
what I mean by it is there's a such idiosyncrasy to your perspective.
yes,
Like,
there is.
yeah, yeah. And his is the same way.
Hmm.
But like I don't ever feel bullshitted by either of you
Um,
or that you're trying to get me to think something or and there's something so refreshing about like the way you will handle I teach now at a university, so I hope that's what I do in my classes, but the way that capacity of welcoming
hmm.
whatever's coming and then finding a way also to wind that into one another. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't really give a shit what you think about Homer, but I
yeah,
want to hear how you respond to it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's not a right one in
yeah,
a way, but
yeah.
like what I really want is you struggling with it or
Hmm.
discovering it or
Yeah, yeah,
finding out how you feel because you got these other people to do it with.
yeah. Yeah, I think that, that came into me from my father
Hmm.
because Northside Chapel, which was this little unsuccessful, my father and I, unsuccessful.
Is that the New Jersey one?
That's the New Jersey one,
Yeah,
yeah, in
yeah.
Patterson. It was my
I was in
father,
love with the lady from Patterson too.
really.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, so when I think about what happened with that church, how he didn't know anything about African Americans when he got there. So he had to learn everything there from them.
Mm,
And, obviously strong African American influence. And then, of course, the civil rights movement goes through in the 60s, but that also would then impact the CRC because CRC kids they went to Christian school, but then they're watching what's going on, beyond the walls. They're getting, interested in music. Some of them are probably dabbling in pot, and so on
especially
one,
in Patterson.
yeah, well, yeah, Patterson. So not only would there be African Americans of various stripes, and because Northside would be an alternative to the black churches, and the black churches all had their programs, he would often
Uh,
get African Americans who
like
tended to
AMC
have,
and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. But he would often get African Americans come in who had a little bit more of a philosophical bent. They
Hmm.
maybe never really got a chance to get it, like one of his best friends at Northside, Doug Harrison. He worked at one of the big three I think it might have been General Motors or Ford. I don't know. I think he drove Ford, so maybe it was Ford. My mother would know. But up in the area, he worked at an automobile at
Hmm.
a car line, which for an African American, that's why they moved up north. They could get better
Yeah.
paying cash
Yeah.
jobs, and but he also had a philosophical bent. He was intelligent. He liked talking
Hmm.
about ideas. And so you
Hmm.
didn't have a lot of that in the black church. But you could find this church, which was mostly African Americans,
Hmm.
and it had kind of a thoughtful Dutch Calvinist pastor who was open, and you could talk to him about stuff. And so
Hmm.
and then for CRC people, it was an alternative for them. So that little Northside Chapel
Ah.
was an alternative church, both for the Dutch and then for the African Americans, and then a few others who would sort of come in and they'd find, the little church. It had an hour
Hmm.
service, so it didn't tie you up all Sunday like a black church did. But it was authentically, if you were African American, you could fit in fine because you were the majority there in that group. But, it's a thoughtful pastor, and you had some of these other thoughtful white people there. And that was a time when it was really a big part of the civil rights movement, I think, down deep was both groups knew each other. And so African Americans moved up from the South, and there were these white people, and human beings are just always kind of curious about other human beings. And here was an opportunity where you could
Especially
get it,
food.
yeah, especially food. You could get an opportunity to know some of these
Right.
other people. And
Yeah.
it wasn't along the
Mm,
lines like the culture was having this massive battle over race. And it was
yeah.
funny because my mother, she's been trying to clean out the house in mercy to
Mm,
her two remaining children. And she came across this letter from some of the youth about the black youth in the church when my father had gotten a call or something. Maybe he'd go to another church and they were worried about that. And they said, Rev, don't go to this other church because then we'll get a black pastor and all we'll hear about is black power. And because they
wow.
understood that here at
They
Northside,
wanted something
that's right. They wanted to
outside of,
have a
yep.
real conversation with these people who were different from them. They wanted to understand white people, and white people
Mm,
wanted to understand African American culture, and they wanted a place that wasn't political to do it. They wanted to know each
yeah.
other personally, and they wanted then to, they could be in Christ together. And so the amalgam of what that produced in a church would be idiosyncratic. And that's very much what happened. So one of the important pastors here, Earl Marlink, who was still alive when I got here, and I became very close to he and his wife, but they moved out of Chicagoland to here because they wanted the same thing. But in Sacramento, it
Mm,
wasn't just African Americans and white people; it was Japanese, Chinese, Korean,
Vietnamese. Yep.
Hispanic, Pacific Island nations. You had this panoply, and all of them wanted to know other cultures,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
but
like the
not
travel
along the
thing.
lines of political, racial discourse. And
Right.
it's interesting because
Mm,
I'd have these other people, white people around who would be saying things like during the woke period, like, well, you really need to be under the authority of people of color. And of course I was. And but they all chose this place too because they wanted actual communion and living relationships, not mediated by this political social
mm,
war discourse where we could actually enjoy each other. We can enjoy each other's food. We can enjoy each other's music. We can enjoy each
yeah.
other's idiosyncrasies. But you can only do this sort of on a small scale.
Right.
Because if you get too large, then suddenly these
Something has
culture,
to organize it.
that's right. And it'll often be the dominant culture war
Yep.
themes that are happening.
Yep.
And so, and I think that's also true of the TLC. I keep telling
Yeah.
people it's small. It kind of has to stay small. Otherwise, the culture war tensions grow too large.
It becomes
And
thematic.
yeah, yeah. So that's my
Mm.
life. And then, when
Was your
Estuary,
dad born in America?
yep, yep, he was
Okay.
born in Wisconsin.
Mm.
Wisconsin Rapids. And it was so
Your
funny.
grandparents
My
immigrated?
grandparents were also born in America,
Oh.
but not by much. So their parents were immigrants.
Hmm.
And their parents were they were in the country less than 10 years before my grandparents were born.
Okay.
So my grandparents had their, the alienation was beginning because their parents were foreigners, but they were fully Americans.
Yeah.
And then in my father's line, it gets weirder because my um, father's line were Jewish. So they
Hmm.
both shed the Jewish thing and came to America, embraced the Dutch immigrant thing. And it wasn't until generations later that it was like, oh, so and that's why I have on my mother's side, I have way more relatives, all the
Mm.
Frisians, than
Mm.
on my father's side, because there are these Jews trying to assimilate not only into America, but also into the Dutch Americans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yep.
Weird. So that's part of the reason I'm probably so idiosyncratic because
Yeah.
I've got all, and then I'm raised in Patterson, so I'm just raised in this
You're right.
tiny little idiosyncratic community. I could do the Dutch thing because I went to their schools,
Mm,
but I was never, the church I was in was very different from all the other CRC churches because it was this little
yeah. Yeah.
idiosyncratic thing.